Welcome back to another episode of The Jesus Agenda, where two pastors try our best to comment on politics, religion, and things that are happening in the culture from an Orthodox Christian worldview perspective. I'm Pastor Chad. This is my partner in crime, Pastor Steve. You just came back from Pittsburgh,
Did you
right?
mean Christ?
Yeah, partner in crime.
Was that a Freudian slip? Or?
It was a Freudian slip. So you just came back from Pittsburgh. How's the homeland doing?
The Promised Land?
Yeah,
it's good.
I don't know if it's the Promised Land or not, but it's definitely something. So anyway, we're going to talk about a few things, but before we get to that, we're recording this on St. Patrick's Day, so we should at least mention
that St. Patrick is not Irish.
Yeah, right. He definitely wasn't Irish. He came from Britain. He was his father was a deacon in the church. He was kidnapped and brought to Ireland as a slave, where he served I don't know how many years as a slave. He finally escapes.
Went to Concordia as seminary.
Yeah, if you believe Lutheran Satire website, he went to Concordia Seminary. You should go to YouTube and type in Lutheran Satire St. Patrick.
It's worthwhile.
It really is a funny video. But aside from that, he goes back to Britain. You know, he goes through the process, becomes a priest, and then he asks his bishop to send him as a missionary back to Ireland. Mm-hmm. Which, you know, I mean, you got to give the guy some props there, right?
Yeah, the people who enslaved him.
He's going back to the people that were messing with him for all those years. And then, of course, he goes back and he's credited with the conversion of Ireland, with converting the Irish pagans. And we all know the rich history of Irish Christianity following Patrick. Of course, there's lots of legend and lore that go with that, chasing out of the snakes and all that kind of stuff. But today, when you watch this, it'll be well past it. But so you can take this advice for next year, that today is not just a day to drink green beer, although you can do that if you want to.
Yeah.
It really is a day to remember a very important missionary.
Nothing's better for you than green food coloring.
That's right. So. Absolutely. When they're getting rid of red, but not green.
Yeah.
They haven't said anything about
green's healthy, basically.
They haven't said anything about green.
No.
Right. Only Kermit. It's really tough being green. But yeah, so happy St. Patrick's Day, and take an opportunity to learn about this great missionary and pastor in the history of the Christian church. And maybe also spend some time learning about Irish Christianity, because it's actually pretty diverse. There's quite a few interesting movements in the church that took place in Ireland. But on to the topics at hand. Before we get to one of our main topics, which is going to be inflation and the consumer price index 2 months into Trump's presidency, we want to mention that it seems like for the last few days, there's been a tremendous effort on the part of the Trump administration to bring the Ukrainians and the Russians together for a ceasefire, at least a 30-day ceasefire, and then hopefully during that period of time to sit down and talk about ending this conflict. And we didn't get that far over the weekend, but we did at least get some signals from Vladimir Putin that he's willing to agree to a ceasefire if certain conditions are met. And some of those conditions include a guarantee, like an ironclad guarantee that Ukraine will never join NATO. And I don't really blame them for that. I mean, you're talking...
they want that buffer zone there.
Yeah, it's border security. It's the same thing. I mean, we watched, last episode, we watched that little video clip of RFK explaining the situation, and he brought up the Cuban Missile Crisis. When the Russians did it, we immediately went to work to say, no, you can't put those ballistic missiles, you know, how many miles, 50 miles off the coast of Florida is Cuba? It's not that far away. So you can understand what the concern is there. So
go back to our episode last week and watch the clip of RFK.
Right,
It'll give you understanding.
And it'll give you some background on that, because we're not going to go too far into it. But we will say, spend some time in prayer, praying that this conflict will come to an end. You know, when you have a situation like this, the best you can hope for is that both sides are willing to compromise on certain things. And so let's just pray that these two groups can be brought together and the bloodshed can end, because so many hundreds of thousands of people are dead. And I can't even think of what would be the last... I mean, I should have Googled it, but the last European conflict was probably Bosnia, right? I can't think of anything else that's taken place in Europe. Okay. All right, so pray for that. On to today's first topic. We're going to talk about the Consumer Price Index and where it came in at. So When Trump took office, it was at 3.3%, and the expectation for this, I guess the reporting is for February, not for March. The expectation is it would be 3.2%, and it came in at 3.1%, which, of course, the Trump administration is touting as the lowest that has been in 4 years. We're going to take a quick look at a clip of Trump's press secretary giving, it's about a 1 minute long clip of just telling us what this is, and then we'll discuss it a little bit.
I appreciate it. Thank you. So now that the President Trump's policies are starting to take shape, how long will it take to cycle through and get some of the actual prices that Americans are paying to come down?
Prices at the store and at the grocery pump?
All of the above.
Across the board, sure. Well, the president is doing everything he can, obviously, to reduce the cost of living crisis in this country as quickly as possible. That's why he signed a litany of executive orders across the board. In the first couple of weeks here, he declared a national energy emergency. He committed to cutting 10 regulations for every new one on the book. As you know, working for a Fox Business-related outlet, deregulation and energy independence are huge drivers of reducing inflation in this country. And I think Americans can be assured by the results President Trump had in his first term, when, again, inflation was 1.4% when he left office.
Is it months or is it a year? And will Americans have the patience to wait for it?
I don't have a timeline, but the president is doing everything that he possibly can to reduce cost of living for Americans at home.
First of all, can we talk about how much better she? I don't have to talk about it, but
Yeah.
just mention how much better she is than Korean.
Oh, yeah.
Jean-Pierre or whatever. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she doesn't have to read off of a binder.
Huge binder
for
this
every little
thick.
thing.
Yeah.
I think she's doing a great job, and I think she handles the room really well, and she's got the messaging down, and she seems to be on point. Now, she's better than me because I made a big error because I'm calling it the Consumer Price Index, and it's not that. It's Consumer Price Inflation. So when I read the original article, I saw CPI and just immediately thought of. So the annual core consumer price inflation rate in the United States, which excludes items, and this is really important, because if you're going to the grocery store, you're probably not noticing this yet, right? So the CPI, the consumer price inflation rate, excludes food and energy. So it's not going to, and I'm assuming that by energy, we're talking about natural gas, heating, that kind of thing. Because I have noticed, at least in our immediate area, I have noticed a decrease in gas prices.
It's almost $3, which is down. Yeah.
So and in some places it's lower than I know. If you go to one of the big car washes that we have here that I'm not going to mention the name of, I think it's down to like $2.80, $2.85, and that's without getting the car wash. If you get the car wash, it goes like 5 cents lower than that. But anyway, the core consumer price inflation rate eased to 3.1% in February from 3.3% in January, and below what the market expected, which is 3.2%. So this is the lowest figure since April of 2021. So it's a good sign.
This index is what, an average of?
So this is the inflation index.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So what it's. I'm not really sure how this works into just like overall inflation, but I think that's what this tracks. I think what it is it's saying, when we were talking 2 years ago, the inflation rate was like, 6-7%.
Yeah.
I think this is what we're talking about is the consumer price inflation. And what it's saying is that core consumer prices, which is the best measure of inflation, dropped to its lowest level in 4 years. So if you take this in concert with the jobs report that just came out, a week ago or 2 weeks ago, things are going in the right direction.
Yeah. And that job report is with laying off a ton of government
ton
employees.
of federal employees.
Yeah.
And I was watching the news this morning, and they were talking about favorability ratings, and they mentioned that the Democrats, and this was an NBC poll and I think a CNN poll, and the NBC poll had the Democrats' favorability rating at like 27%. CNN had it at maybe 28 or 26 or 28, I can't remember. For the and it's not like the Republicans are running away with it, right? Because they're maybe at like 50 or just a little bit below 50. But the big number to look at, and what they were mentioning on the news, was if you go back to November of 2024, the country, the percentage of people in the country that felt like the country was going in the right direction was like 26%, 27%. Now, 2 months into the Trump administration, the newest numbers are 44%. So 44%
huge increase.
Yeah, that's enormous.
Yeah,
44% of those polled or of Americans believe that the country's heading in the right direction. And so when we're looking at the good jobs report coming out, we're looking at the consumer price inflation rate lowering, which is not a lot, right? 3.3 to 3.1 is not a huge jump, but
a lot of this stuff takes time. People are funny. They were like 2 weeks into his presidency. They're like, look, eggs are still the same price. Right. It's like, goodness sakes.
Yeah.
Like, this stuff doesn't happen instantly.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think they're being a little too, maybe overly literal about campaign rhetoric. That I think the campaign rhetoric is that I'm going to work on it right away. I can't immediately make it get better. I mean, you killed over 1 million chickens.
It has to go down the supply line, right?
Yeah. I mean, I can't give birth to 1 million chicks. You know, what do you want me to do? I mean,
and the tariffs are going to hurt the inflation rate.
Sure.
And they're going to slow the decrease in prices.
Sure.
So all that stuff has to be weighed in.
But there's a reason, though, and I don't think people understand this. So Trump has done a few things, and we've mentioned this before, that Trump is not what you would call a true conservative, right? He's really a populist with conservative leanings. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that he opposes is free trade. And he opposes the free trade agreements that we've made in the excuse me.
Bless you.
The free trade agreements that we've made in the last probably 3 or 4 administrations. So, for example, we made these free trade agreements on steel, and we lost, thousands of steel jobs that went overseas. Yeah. So the goal of the tariffs is really to bring jobs back to America, to bring products back to America, to make it too expensive for American companies to make their product overseas, because that's been the biggest.
So there's a short-term pain,
right? Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. You're going to have a little bit of a tightening of the belt, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I noticed. I don't know if you watch, if you have, other than your retirement, I don't know if you have any money in the stock market, but I have a little bit just to play around with, and I use an app. And so I was watching it, and I get notifications. I had to turn the notifications off because everything was tanking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
For like a week, everything was just going, it's down.
That's when you buy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. That's when you buy, because, it seems like we have a short-term memory, because the stock market is like up over 40,000. And when Trump took office the first time, it was under 10.
Yeah.
And it's really never gone. It's really never gone back down. So you can't expect this to, last forever, right? I mean, at some point
we're in a bubble.
Yeah, we're definitely in a bubble. And let's just hope that we're, people make wise decisions before the bubble pops, because it will pop at some point. I think, though, that this ride with inflation that we've had, at least from a faith perspective, from a Christian perspective, is how much faith as Christians do we put in the promise of God to take care of us versus the security that we feel in our wallets and in our jobs and our retirement accounts and things like that. This, to me, this is a first commandment issue. Yeah. When we talk about,
where do we have our riches stored?
Yeah. Who do we put our trust in? John Calvin, I know we make fun of John Calvin, right? But John Calvin, one of the things he said that I've always liked is that the human heart is an idol factory. That we make idols very quickly.
And naturally.
Very naturally. And Luther used to say, in the Large Catechism, he says, your God is whatever you put your trust in. So if you put your trust in your finances, in your wallet, in your 401k, in your job, and in the economy being, going well, then that's your God. Your God is not the God of the Bible. Your God is that, because the God of the Bible calls us to trust in him to provide for our needs, no matter what the circumstances are that are around us.
Yeah. Proverbs 23:5, cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone, for they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle.
Yeah.
And that's true.
Yeah, especially if you get married.
Especially if you're investing. Oh, yeah, that's true. Good point.
As soon as you
Where
get
did
married,
it go?
As soon as you get married, you have no idea where your money went. Or have kids. As soon as you have kids, you're totally done. But yeah, with the economy, you never know what's going to happen.
All of your money in your stock market could be happening in 1928, was it?
Yeah. Well, it just happened in 2008, right? I mean, how many people had 401ks that totally were gone, or not gone, but at least half the value that they thought they were going to have? You know,
imagine being just ready for retirement and that happens.
Yeah, it was devastating. I mean, I knew some people, or I was at least within the sphere of people that happened to. And of course, it's devastating. What are they going to do? They're 65 and now they got to go to work and, whatever the deal is. But ultimately, we're called to put our trust in God and what God is going to care for us. I mean, Paul says in Philippians 4, and I'm always amazed by Philippians. I mean, Paul's a guy who was in and out of jail, right? I mean, he was constantly getting arrested for preaching the gospel. And here he is in a dungeon.
No 401k.
No retirement, nothing at all. And most likely he's shackled to a Roman guard or to a Philippian jailer. And he writes in Philippians 4:19, my God will provide all your needs according to his riches and glory. And here he is in a dungeon.
He was probably thinking of Jesus' words, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Yeah. And all these things, the clothing, all those things will be added to you as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, the economy, hopefully it's going to get better. And we want to see, and I do believe that the policies that the Trump administration is pursuing will continue to push us in the right direction. Yeah, I'm among the 44% of the country that thinks things are going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think they're going in the right direction. Yeah.
And I think that we will see the economy improve. And I don't think it's going to take that long. I really don't. I also think that if this thing with Ukraine and Russia,
don't panic if there's some growing pain.
Right? Yeah. Don't panic. Don't freak out. But I do think if we get this thing settled with Russia and Ukraine, you're going to see that's going to be a huge economic boost. Because people, when stuff like that happens in another part of the world, especially when it's two major European countries. I mean, Russia is a huge energy supplier to all of Europe.
Huge, yeah.
So, I mean,
when Ukraine's huge for wheat.
And right, Ukraine is the breadbasket of the continent. So there's a sort of a disruption that's going on there that's affecting even our economy. And so I think that when that gets worked out, things will get better too. But I do believe that we're pursuing the right policies. And I think that's a good thing. So continue to pray that the country heads in the right direction. Continue to pray
for peace.
Pray for peace in Ukraine and Russia, and just and also pray for yourself if you're spending a lot of time anxious over what's happening in the economy. Pray that God would bolster your faith and just keep. That's really the daily life of the Christian, is to turn away from those things that draw us from God and turn towards God each and every day. Speaking of that, you can help us help others turn towards God by supporting our podcast. You can do that in one of two ways, or you can do both. That would be even better. But you can become a supporter, a monthly supporter, for as little as $3 a month. And or you can send us, or you can sponsor an episode and send us info about your church, your ministry, your business, or maybe you just want to say hi, Mom, and then send her the video. Who knows? That's $20, and DJ's going to put up our email. If you want to sponsor us an episode, you can email us, and we'll get your info from you, and our website address to our podcast. website that if you go in there, you click on that and it'll show you right where to hit for support, and you can become a monthly supporter for as low as $3 a month, and that will help us produce this podcast and get it out there. And then, of course, if you enjoy these episodes, like and subscribe to the YouTube page, like and subscribe to the Facebook page, and share the episodes. We're doing our best to try to optimize the language that we use in our descriptions. I jokingly said that I even used, well, I mean, it was true, but I even used ChatGPT for our last episode to get, I write
my sermons with ChatGPT.
Yeah. See, my wife writes my sermons. So every time somebody asks me, I say, "Oh, my wife wrote it. Go talk to her." But I did. What it was is I was watching this video of this guy. You know, there's all these how to get more people to watch your YouTube videos. And of course, I'm watching the video of the guy who's telling me how to get more people to watch. Right. And one of the things he said was, go to ChatGPT and ask and give it sort of the contents of your episode and ask it to give you an SEO optimized summary. And actually, I think the summary is the best summary that we have out of all of them. But I noticed yesterday that we only had like 25 views or 30 views. So it's not that good. We got to figure out a way to get into the algorithm. So until we do, we need you to share the episodes with your friends, with your family, especially with the people at church, because this show is really aimed at Christians. I mean, we're happy to have anybody join us, but really we're aimed at even Calvinists.
We're just teasing Calvinists.
If Calvinists join us, it must be because they were predestined to.
I doubt there's any who are watching anymore.
But anyway,
DJ ran them all off.
I don't know if it was DJ. I don't know if it was DJ or me. It might have been me.
Just blame DJ.
So we'll transition to the religion category, and we brought this up probably about a month ago, the fall of the Assad regime in Syria and the rise of the Islamist group. The guy who is trying to sell himself off sort of as a reformed Islamist, but he had previously been linked to Al-Qaeda. And then after that, he was linked with ISIS, and I can't remember the name of the group he was leading, but the AP reports, and our concerns, of course, were primarily for the Christian community, because the Assad regime was terrible, but he was actually really good to the Christians. Christians definitely lived in peace then, but it appears that that's not the case now. Now, I want to make it clear that this is not officially the government that has taken over, the transitional government of Syria that is led by this guy who has been linked to terrorist groups. But it's, after this, the Syrian civil war was not like one group against another. It was like a collection of groups against Assad. And so each of those militant groups has their own agenda.
Yeah.
And so there's a few militant groups that are still in the north, which is where there's a lot of Christians, and they have attacked a couple of regions. By the way, the new president of Syria is Ahmed al-Sharaa, and he's the former leader of one of these Islamist insurgent groups.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, right. What could go wrong? But there's been a bunch of sectarian violence in general, and a lot of it has been directed towards Syria's Christian minority. And the number that I was seeing was something like 7,000 have been killed in the northern part of Syria.
Wow.
And I can't imagine, I didn't look to see what the total population of Syrian Christians is. I don't know if you want to do that, DJ, and see what the total number is. But, this idea...
Well, there's 1,000 left now.
If they can't build a pluralistic society, then they're not going to get any Western support. So this Ahmed al-Sharaa at least has some kind of motivation, even if he's not a guy committed to it himself. If he's committed to the survival of his own government, he needs the West.
But it was just one of the regions, so like one of the groups was doing this.
Right, yeah. Right? It's not officially the transitional government. Right. So it's not him. So I don't want there to be any, misleading understanding here.
But he doesn't have control of his nation.
Yeah, there's a problem there, right? Yeah. Because you've got all these individual insurgent groups that sort of coalesced in order to get rid of Assad.
Well, I think we have a number.
What's the number?
So now these numbers are not super new. It's back from 2022, but it went from 1.5 million in 2011 to 300,000 in 22.
Oh, wow. And I know some flee the country right after when the stuff was happening. So it's
a lot of it was because of ISIS.
Yeah.
Right. So that number definitely decreased because of ISIS. I mean,
it's probably significantly less now.
Because there was a big portion of Syria that was a part of the quote unquote Islamic Caliphate. So I don't know if Christians are going to come back there or not. That would really be interesting to see if there's a movement of Syrian Christians back towards Syria. There's a very unique history, a very unique Christian history there because Antioch is in Syria. And so Antioch is actually the first place that were called Christians. Prior to that, at least among the Jewish believers, they were called the Way. That's what you see in the book of Acts.
Yeah.
And actually there's an early Hebrew derogatory way of saying that, which if I remember
Lutheran.
correctly is
Lutheran.
I was going to say Methodist.
Wow.
No, it's actually, I think it's called Manim, and I'd have to look it up.
You see, Calvinists, we make fun of each other too.
Yeah, we do, absolutely. But, we're not as funny as you guys. But anyway, the early Jews used to make fun of it, or the first century Jewish leaders used to make fun of the Way, and they had some kind of derogatory word for them. But so they get to Antioch, which has this deep, deep history of Christianity, and that's when they're first called Christians. So I think it's a shame that these places where Christianity was born are losing Christians. And by the way, it's not just in places like Syria. I mean, this has happened in Israel and Palestine. Most of the Christians in the Holy Land have left.
Even in Turkey to some level.
Well, in Turkey, yeah, it's terrible in Turkey.
Yeah.
But in the Holy Land, it's mostly due to the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza. But there have been,
and the Israelis aren't always so friendly towards Christians either.
No, the issue is you're Palestinian before you're Christian, and so I think we need to understand too, and I don't want to get too lost in the woods here, but I think we understand that we need to understand that religious Jews in Israel do not like Jesus at all. So they don't, and there's a number of Orthodox groups who are violent towards Christians. Right. But in terms of Israeli policy, like official policy, I would say that the treatment that Palestinian Christians receive at the hands of the IDF is less about them being Christian and more about them being Palestinian. Although I did see some video from Gaza. There's only a couple of churches in Gaza, and one of them was, essentially blown up by the IDF, and some of the IDF soldiers were in there making fun of Mary and things like that. So, I mean, you're going to see that, I would suppose, but generally, whether it's Syria or Israel or, Yemen, for example, had, or Egypt, which has a big population of Copts, or Iraq, probably the saddest story in the Middle East in the last 25 years is the loss of the Iraqi Christian community. There's hardly any Christians in Iraq anymore. And that, again, is one of the most ancient Christian communities in the world. And they're gone because of ISIS. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You got people coming through crucifying Christians. You're going to find a way to get out.
And this division and hostility towards Christians, I mean, it obviously started, in the book of Genesis.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing how far back these roots go.
Yeah. Well, Jesus told us that they persecuted him. We should expect to be persecuted.
Yeah.
I think
don't be surprised when you're persecuted.
Yeah, I think we get caught up in this. There's this. Lutherans, we differentiate between the theology of the cross and the theology of glory, and this idea that you're going to live your best life now, or that you're supposed to be perfected, or something like that. That's a theology of glory. That's what happens after the resurrection.
Glorification.
Yeah, it's not happening now. We live in the world. Jesus said you're going to have crosses to bear. So we have to expect that. I mean, the cross is about a Savior who loses in order to win. And he's telling us, look, this was my path. Why? It's going to be your path. You're not going to. Now, you shouldn't take that as, oh, man, my whole life is going to be about suffering. No, not really. Your whole life's not going to, especially if you live in the West. I mean, we're talking, when we talk about persecution in the West, we're talking.
The air conditioning broke in the church.
Yeah. We're talking first world problems.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about places like the Middle East or think about Nigeria. These Fulani herdsmen, Islamist terrorists, are coming in and slaughtering Nigerian Christians, taking their daughters away as slaves.
I know. We can't even imagine. My dad always says we haven't really been persecuted.
No, absolutely
None
not.
of us have.
Yeah, I don't want to hear that. When people say to me, oh,
Someone was mean to me.
They didn't say Merry Christmas. Shut up. I don't really care.
Somebody was mean on my Facebook to me.
That's not persecution.
No.
That's not persecution. That's a first world problem. If they take your daughter away and make her a child slave bride and then kill you, that's persecution.
Just imagine having your family torn away from you and you're never going to see them again. You know they're going to be killed, or watching somebody in your family die in front of your eyes. Like, that's persecution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Losing your livelihood,
And it's not just, although I think we could spend a whole episode, and I think we will at some point, on Islam and Islamic treatment of religious minorities, especially Christians and Jews. But it's not just, we could say, or I would say, what 1 John, right, says that anyone who denies that the Christ has come in the flesh, anyone that denies the Father and the Son, is Antichrist. That's the definition of Antichrist. So Islam is Antichrist because it denies that Jesus is the Son of God, and it denies the Trinity. So it's automatically Antichrist. But there are other things that are Antichrist. The Chinese Communist Party is Antichrist because it forces itself or forces Christians to put the communist ideals and party ahead of Jesus and Christianity. And it closes churches that won't do that. It knocks churches down that won't do that. It sends Christians to prison for not doing that, or to re-education camps where they can learn properly how to have the right hierarchy, Xi Jinping and then maybe
the
Jesus.
state comes first. Yeah.
And that's the same in North Korea, where Christians are put in concentration camps. And or we could think of, parts of India where Hindu mobs rush in on a Sunday morning and burn churches down while people are at church.
Yeah, we can't even imagine.
Yeah, so, there's Christian persecution going on all over the world, and we shouldn't be surprised from it. But and we're kind of saying, obviously, we're not persecuted, but we can be ostracized.
Yeah, sure.
And our faith can put us on the outside of something because of our faith commitment.
Even our family.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But, the culture in general can make us feel like...
There's the same thing for us. Don't be surprised by it.
Don't be surprised by it. It's going to happen.
Yeah, and just knowing that it's going to happen, like you just said, should give us comfort.
Right.
Knowing that we aren't alone. And it even says that in the scriptures.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just know that those before you,
And we have this promise, and this is a promise maybe that as Americans we haven't... I will hear this a lot at funerals because it's when most of us come into contact with death is at a funeral. But maybe especially for our brothers and sisters who are facing death because of their faith, Romans 8:36-39, where Paul writes, I'm convinced that nothing can ever separate us from God's love, neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither our fears for today nor our worries about tomorrow. Not even the powers of hell can separate us from God's love. No power in the sky above or the earth below. Indeed, nothing in all creation will ever be able to separate us from the love of God that is revealed in Christ Jesus our Lord. So,
Amen.
Even whether we're facing discomfort, which is what we could probably call our version of persecution, or facing, the threat of actual violence for
which
our
could
faith.
come, you never know.
Yeah, we don't really know how things could go in this country long term. But either way, we have this promise that nothing that can happen to us can separate us from God's care for us, God's love for us. My dad used to say, and I don't know if this was like an original thing of his. I never really asked him, or if he got it from someone else, but he would tell me all the time, whenever I would come to him and complain and say, my life isn't going the way I want it to go, or I don't like how it feels, and my dad would say, well, the symbol of our faith is a cross, not a cushion. You shouldn't expect to have it easy.
I like that.
And they had a history, I wish that I had written a lot of stuff down, because my dad passed away a few years ago, and my mom has dementia, so she doesn't really, remember a lot of that stuff. But growing up, I heard all kinds of stories about their faith and how they just relied on God. Like in situations where I would be freaking out. Like there's like $5 in the checking account. I got no money to pay bills. And my parents' first thing they would do is sit down and pray and say, Lord, we need help here. And, it's not like they did that and then didn't do anything else. They would obviously go out and try to figure it out too. But ultimately they would end up being blessed by somebody or something and he would say multiple times, it was just exactly what we needed. It was never more. It wasn't like we were, we needed 100 and we got 500. We needed 100 and we got 100, And I always admired that, because I don't really feel like I could do that. Like I'm looking, their faith was very,
it was probably tested a lot. Then it grows.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
When faith is tested, it grows. Yeah.
I think, I agree with you. I think if you're kind of refined by the fire, right? So if you're going through a lot of stuff where you don't have the choice but to rely on your faith, then it's which is why I think maybe we struggle with it so much, because as Americans living when we do, maybe especially living at the end of the 20th, beginning of the 21st century, everything's at our fingertips. I mean, even now, DoorDash, right? I mean, just the dumbest stuff. My wife is thrilled that she can order from Walmart and Walmart will deliver it. So because she hates going to Walmart, but she wants to get stuff at Walmart. And so she's like, yeah, it's so wonderful that they just, it doesn't cost anything. It's like, I don't know. I get it, but I don't know. I tell people all the time, if the apocalypse came tomorrow, I'd be the first one to die. I can't hunt.
You got some storage.
I've got some storage. I'll live for a couple of weeks, but then I'm done. So I'm just saying, I'm going to need to be the spiritual advisor to some people who know what they're doing, so that I'll stay alive for a period of time. All right. So our last segment is going to be on culture, and we started talking about this a little bit, I think, in our last episode. But
yeah, we did.
I decided to look up some numbers, because we were talking about church attendance. Generally, it's lower across the board than it has been in previous years.
But there's been somewhat of a plateau.
But we talked about the plateau that the Pew Research had sent out, or had done a survey, rather, that seemed to indicate that maybe the decline has at least halted.
Which alone is like encouraging.
Which, to me, that's huge news. So then I decided this last week to just take a look at some things and see, what's actually going on. And Gallup did a survey, and DJ's going to put a couple graphs up for us. Gallup did a survey that was talking about the percentage of church-going people that attend regularly, and this broaches the line of, and they kind of asked, it depends on what your metric is for regular.
Yeah, we talked about that last time.
If once a month is regular, then the number is going to be a lot higher, right? So they used weekly as regular attendance, and this is what they came up with. Their key statistics: 20% of all Americans attend church every week. 41% of Americans are in the monthly church attendance, which actually isn't that bad if you think about it. It's almost half of all Americans go to church at least once a week. And then it says 57% of Americans are seldom or never in religious service attendance at all. And regular church attendance has steadily declined since the turn of the century. But the more interesting numbers to me were what happens when you go after that 20% that attends weekly, and you break that down by generation. And this is what they found. And this will be one of the two graphs that DJ puts up for us. What they found is that the highest number of our highest number for generation is 39% of church-going millennials go every week.
That was shocking.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I believe that they haven't, because this was a 2023 survey, and they haven't included Gen Z yet because there's too many Gen Zers that are minors still, maybe under the age of 18. So any number they come up with for Gen Z is going to be probably inaccurate. Although they do say that Gen Z is showing all of the markers toward more traditional values in terms of how they view their sexuality.
Maybe the pendulum's starting to
I
go.
think the pendulum is definitely swinging culturally. So 39% of church-going millennials attend weekly. Listen, this is up 21% from 2019.
Well, for us to plateau, it has to be up because the boomers are starting to die off.
Right.
And so...
Well, not just that. The biggest drop among boomers is post-COVID. Because just prior to COVID, that's 2019, millennials were at 21%, boomers were at like 40-something%. So now and so the roles have reversed, and boomers are down.
All the hippies are scared.
Well, I think that's part of it. No, I'm serious.
Yeah,
I think they got this major health scare, and they just decided, I'm not ever going to do that again.
Safer for me to stay at home.
I would be curious, I mean, it would be interesting to see if anybody does any study that tries to measure, have they also quit going to like concerts? Have they also quit going to, other areas where there's like a big gathering of people? Have they quit that as well? Or have they just quit going to church, which would basically be par for the course for Christians of any generation. But so when you break down
stop
that,
playing it online, some more will come back.
yeah, maybe, or they'll just quit altogether, right? Non-white millennials have the biggest increase. 45% of non-white millennials are attending church weekly compared to 35% of white millennials. So there's an increase in folks who are not of European descent, which is interesting. And I think, let's see, it's on this graph. So I can pull the graph up here. Boomers are down to 25%. So there's like a 20% jump for millennials and a 20% decrease for boomers. And Gen X, as usual, is right in the middle.
Yeah.
That's right. Gen X is right in the middle at like 32 or 33%.
3 cheers for mediocrity.
That's right. That's exactly what we are. Depending on where you are on the Gen X line,
We're like the independence of
we are. Absolutely.
Genealogy. Yeah.
So I think it's interesting, but I wonder, how does this, if at all, how do things like this affect or shape, rather, the mission of the church? I mean, how do you reach those? Now, first of all, we should make clear that we're talking about church-going millennials, not the average millennial on the street, right? So you're not going to walk into a millennial bar and pick up 45% of them or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
So how does it shape what local churches do?
I feel like there's always the argument, like, is it that we're doing something wrong, or is it just like a fruit of the age?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or a combination of both in some way. Because, a lot of churches' response is, well, we need fancier music,
right,
or we need better programs, but they don't have those things in like China, for example, where in the underground church, where they just go and have one Bible to share among all of them.
Yeah.
They don't have the fancy preacher so our fixes sometimes, I don't know, are the actual problem.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, persecution definitely helps church.
Yeah, it does. The seed of the church.
I mean,
the blood of saints.
The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. I think that when things are not so easy, because we have this propensity to trust ourselves and to trust the creature comforts that we have. And when that's not there, what are you left with? You're left with your faith.
All of a sudden, the faith becomes more real.
Yeah,
because you don't have the accoutrements.
And I don't think. Look, I'm not really too hard on people for that, because I think all of us fit into that.
Yeah.
Because we live in a very
if you have it,
space.
you're going to embrace it.
Yeah. And I think when you get used to comfort, you're used to comfort.
Yeah.
But I agree with you there, and I also agree with you that I don't think local churches need to change their appearance in terms of what are they doing. If you've always done a particular kind of music, don't change it because you think you're going to bring in anybody, because believe me, they're not coming because of that.
No.
And I think the problem is that because we live in the age of mega churches, that kind of gives off that vibe. But listen,
Mega churches attract Christians from other churches generally. I saw a statistic on that. It was 97% of church growth in mega churches comes from other churches.
Yeah.
So a very small amount are new people that are like, oh, wow, I like their music.
Yeah. Well, generally, though, I agree with that 100%. That's how they grow. But generally, that's how all Christian churches grow in America.
Right.
It's mostly church transfer. We're not making a ton of new converts, right? What I would say is that we do get, at least I know, like my church has gotten a lot of folks, like all of our growth have all been millennials, by the way, the last 2 years. Pretty much.
So you fit that statistic.
Pretty much. I have 4 people right now in a membership class, and one of them is an older couple that's coming because the Catholic churches are closing. But the other couple is a millennial couple, and the growth the last couple of years has been mostly millennials. But they were people who were baptized as infants, but didn't really have much of a church connection. So I wouldn't really count them as a sort of a transfer, even though they were baptized Catholic or they were baptized something else. They just weren't really that involved in church, but they weren't non-Christian.
Unchurched, though.
Yeah. Unchurched, but not non-Christian. So, but the other thing about the mega churches is that most of their growth comes through advertising. They're not. So I'll give you an example. When I was in seminary, there was a church in my area that started in a high school, and the couple who planted the church had come from, I can't remember, Texas or California, but somewhere in that area. And there was a small group of people who were interested in the church, and I'm not sure how they connected, and they started in homes. Then they ended up in this school and whatever. So one of my projects was to study their growth. Like, how did they grow? What did they use to grow? And what I found was that their most used tool was direct mail. They sent something like 20,000 postcards a week.
When was this?
This was, in the 90s.
So pre-social media.
Yeah, before social media. And so, they used direct mail, and they would even have the statistics, and they were happy to share them. For every 20,000, they might get 100 visitors over like a month's period of time. And out of that 100, 10 might stay. And out of that 10, 5 might become members. And so that was the nuts and bolts of their missions program, was sending postcards. So they weren't doing anything spectacular, right? I mean, they just had money. They had people who were willing to help them build this congregation. Most churches in this country have about 100 people. And that is the mass of churches. So you don't want to don't compare your church to
the average is something like 50.
Yeah. The largest church, at least outreach.com, the last couple of years has done a list of like the top 25 churches, the largest churches and churches that have grown, and they're like up in the 10,000 range.
Like Lakewood.
Yeah, I like Lakewood, but even a couple years ago, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, the fastest, or the church that had the most growth was the Lutheran Church of Hope in Iowa, which, if you saw it, I mean, it doesn't look Lutheran in terms of what you would expect.
It looks like non-denom.
Looks like non-denominational, a non-denominational church. They're actually in our association of churches now. They just came in like a year ago because everybody on our national board is a whore for whoever has the big money.
Yeah,
I don't want to say that. It's improper to say that because there are a couple people who are on the national board that are not, but the other ones are just kooky charismatics who are happy for you to just join. and help them.
If you want to join, you're in.
Yeah,
basically.
you're in, yeah. And there's really no accountability except in, on paper. You have to follow the Lutheran confessions unless you don't really want to. Then you do it. Then you pretty much do what you want to do. But in defense, there are a number of leaders, both at the national level and especially at the local level, who are committed to the Lutheran confessional standards and stuff like that. So I don't want to throw everybody in the bus. But so anyway, don't compare your local church to a mega church. And I wouldn't say, although I'm highly critical of mega churches, I wouldn't say there's no place for them at all.
Oh yeah,
I think
they do a lot of great things.
I think there's definitely a purpose, as long as they're not teaching.
Some of them are very supportive of smaller churches in the area.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I've had that experience.
And unless they're teaching something that's heretical or something, like Lakewood, for example, where you can live your best life now, but you'll probably go to hell.
I mean,
that should be their motto.
Enjoy while you got it.
That should be their motto. YOLO, the Church of YOLO. We should write Joel Osteen and say, we were thinking you should change your motto.
We have a pitch for you.
We've got a pitch. What do you think? But I don't think they would buy into that. So, but anyway, so
he doesn't believe in hell, though.
He doesn't. Probably not. Him and Rob Bell are going to plant a church next together. Well, hey, this has been a great episode. I hope you get a chance. I hope if you're listening and you went out St. Patrick's Day, I hope your hangover's finally over, whatever day you're listening to this. And I hope that you get to church this weekend, because really, it truly is good for you. Listen, God doesn't need you to go to church for him. You need to go to church for what God is going to give you and what he delivers to you in the proclamation of his word and the administration of his sacraments. So get to church this week. And we hope that you'll tune in next week when we have our next episode. God bless.